I'd love to start.
You don't know how to do all this. No, I'm joking. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Think Sacred podcast. My name is Zach, and I'm here with my father, Phil. And if you're new here, what we do is we talk about kind of we have an open discussion about kind of an overarching topic, and then we kind of see where the conversation goes. And usually we set these up, as if we were just having a conversation, because there's often times what would happen is you and me would have these conversations at home, and they'd usually last, an hour or two, and we'd be, and of course, usually in our private conversations, it's a little more geared toward us specifically, but we really like that, and so then we decided to try to see if we can do a podcast based on the way we talk and speak and discuss certain things, see how our brains go.
Yeah, I mean, we include we're including other people into conversations that mimic what we normally just would have together. So
yeah, it's Before we get into today's topic, which I think we're gonna try to talk about the importance of like the Sabbath, taking days off, holidays, spending time together with family, the importance of family, that kind of stuff, right? Because it is the holidays. It is, we just had Thanksgiving last week, and then we got Christmas coming up and everything. So I think it's important to at least talk about it a little bit. But before we even get into that, I wanted to talk about, we've been doing the podcast now for a while. This is like the 25th episode or something like that. We've done about 25 of them or so. And I have noticed the way I think is I'm starting to get a couple different little ways that I can go, basically at different perspectives that I can reach. And I think a lot of that's based on how we do our discussion, how we think things through. And I think it's starting to have an effect, which I think is really good. Like, I don't know about you. Do you have anything like that going on?
No, I mean, these are, these topics are kind of off the cuff. Most of them we haven't even, said what we're going to discuss until minutes prior to the beginning of the podcast, most of them at least, right? And so all that to say is that for me, just thinking as we're or talking through things, right? And thinking as we're actually going through maybe a subject, a topic, or whatever, it helps me to actually figure things out on a fly, I guess, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And also as we're ebbing and flowing these, through these conversations, I think it does help me at least learn how to think more clearly. Hopefully I can start articulating more concisely and clearly as well. So I think, 25 episodes, it's not like, that's a ton, but I think in the short time it's helped me to think more clearly about whatever we're going to be talking about. You know what I mean? Just really reason through things, in a more comprehensive way than I used to do. So,
yeah. Well, I sit there and I compare it kind of to guitar playing. As you're playing the guitar, right? You get to a point where a lot of it becomes just practice, and the more and more you practice something, the more and more you do it, and you're actively doing it, the better you'll get. You know what I mean? And I think. So I don't know. I think I'm already seeing, pretty massive benefits just in having our conversations. And like I said, some of the little, like I had like a little epiphany like yesterday and a little one the day before, you know what I mean? And I was just kind of like thinking through them, and not saying they were big enough to completely stick or anything like that. And I couldn't verbalize them right now, but it helps. I don't know. I think it's cool. Anyways. All right, I think we should talk about holidays, or but in another sense, just the fact that there are days off. I mean, the Sabbath is, one of the 10 Commandments, right? So And even in Genesis, right, when God creates the world on the
Mm-hmm.
seventh day, He rests, right? So it's a very, very important thing, it would seem,
Mm-hmm.
as if it's in the beginning of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
if it's in Genesis, I assume it's important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if it's part of the Ten Commandments, I assume it's important. Um, and you've mentioned, the gathering of the saints and how that's important and everything. And I think these things are all connected. It's all about, you know, being with your family or spending time with your family, um, resting, relaxing, having a good time, that kind of stuff. I don't know. What's your initial thought on this topic here?
I think so. I think there's a few different topics, and I do think they're all connected. Right? We have the Sabbath day.
Yeah.
Right? What is it? What does it mean? We have rest because that's what Sabbath. That's what Sabbath day was intended for. It was for people to rest. In other
Yeah.
words, like in the Old Testament, when the Israelites would go get the manna meaning what is this? We don't.
Right.
Manna, they were instructed to go out 6 days and get it, and on the seventh day, on the last day, which would be Friday, right? They would get double the portion in order to have enough for Saturday, so they wouldn't have to go out Saturday to do the work, right? So it's so understanding that it was there for a rest period. Physical rest is one thing, spiritual rest is another, and we can actually talk about that. I do
Yeah.
think that that it does intertwine with because you mentioned holidays before, right, soon before we got on this broadcast today. The gathering of family, what does that mean? The celebration, how does God think about that? How does God think about, just general gatherings in and of themselves,
Yeah.
So I think all of them are intertwined. And then one other thing too is, and I don't want to miss this because we've talked about types and shadows. So if we're talking about, the Ten Commandments, what do they mean? The God says to keep the Sabbath day. He says to honor the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Right? What is that? What is it intended for? What does it mean? I do think that there could be a dualistic meaning there, meaning like there could be a physical rest that we need, but also that we just need to take time off. But when we take time off, what do we do? But also, more importantly, it's a type and shadow of what is where is our spiritual rest found. So hopefully that starts the conversation.
Yeah, well, one thing you mentioned specifically the word celebration. When you said that, there are actually a lot of verses where where the word celebration is used, I should say. There's lots of verses in the Bible where the word, where they're talking about celebrations, or they're talking about, like, I think when in the parable with the prodigal son, when he returns, right, doesn't the dad throw a celebration for the son?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, he does.
So there are other instances, during the wedding there's a celebration. There are other instances, I think specifically in like the New Testament and gathered around Jesus, where there's this idea of celebrating certain things. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. I don't know, that word just stuck out a little bit to me. I mean, I don't know, what are some examples, I guess, in the Bible that we have of specific times where they're talking about celebrating things, or
I mean, we could say the Sabbath is a rest day. We could say the Passover, right? We could say, for example, the weddings, right?
Yeah.
And the wedding feast, is a really good example in John, in the second chapter of John. It says this was his first miracle. It specifically says that. And what was his first miracle? It was turning water into wine. and all of that, what that meant, right? He saved the best for last, you know.
Yeah.
But it also does have to do with the wedding feast too. At the same time, when Christ talks about the wedding feast, you know what I mean? And also talks about who's going to be there at the wedding feast, and then invited guests versus uninvited guests. I mean, all of this just intertwines really well, you know.
That's another parable. There's a parable, right, where basically an uninvited guest shows up to a feast, basically.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Is that? I think that my general understanding of that is it's supposed to be a parable of heaven itself or something like that, or God's kingdom.
Yeah, God's kingdom. I would say definitely God's kingdom. But it does say that you have to have, you have to have the right garment to put on to be at the wedding feast. What does that mean? What does it symbolize, right? And then who was he gathering? You think about, oh my gosh, I mean, we could go in 50 different directions, you know? So let's talk a little, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple things maybe. So think about the wedding in Cana, right? The wedding in Cana where Jesus turned the water to wine, right? Yeah. It was a wedding feast. It was his first miracle. It was the first miracle where, it was the first miracle, and it was where the kind of head of the banquet said, usually you save everyone's drunk. This is what he's implying, right? It's not good to get drunk, but it's a fact, you know what I mean? Like when everyone's had their fill of drink, basically you're going to save the lousy wine until last because they're not going to notice the difference. And he says, no, you've actually saved the best wine until last, right? What does that really mean and symbolize? People can make their own interpretation, but you know, I want you to research it and figure out what that means, right? Because it's real important to understanding what it symbolized, right? Christ coming here to fulfill what he was supposed to do here on earth. So the wedding feast and the best wine for last. That's a great one there. We talked about the prodigal son. The prodigal son, because this kind of feeds into a little bit about the wedding feast parable. If you think about it, you think about the prodigal son, right? One son went off and did his own thing. There were two sons, right? Not just one.
Well, it's another parable that's supposed to be about the kingdom of God, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Keep going.
And one, you know, the eldest son basically just said, I've been with you all this time. I've done all these things. And he says, well, you've already had. In other words, that eldest son was jealous that he took in the son that had done all of these things of debauchery, right? And he basically welcomed him back in, even before the youngest son could get any words out of his mouth. He was surmising what he was going to say to his father, right?
Yeah.
And before he could even get the words out, his father told him, he said, you know, bring the ring, put on the clothes, and then let's slaughter the fattened calf. My son who, what does he say? He says, who was dead is now alive. He was lost and now he's found, right? So it does have to do with him, but it also has to do with the other son who was mad. It was
strange,
you know. And people miss that part. And he says, "I've been here the whole time." And he says, "Yeah, you've been here the whole time, and you've been blessed because I've been giving you these things the whole time, and you haven't been lacking, but you're mad because this person that's been lost is now found." You know, you're mad at me giving him a feast. I've given you feast all the time, you know. So that was interesting too. But if you think about that, and you think about the wedding feast parable, right? The wedding feast parable is really has to do with the Israelites. You've been invited, and you keep making excuses for not coming to the banquet, right? And then finally, I say, I'm going to go out. I'm going to send my servants out to the streets and the alleyways and every other place. And those people were invited. They come to the wedding feast. Yeah. They have the proper garments on. And then someone's trying to sneak in the back door, right? It's kind of akin to the works righteousness that we've talked about, you know, the law and the gospel and different things. I come in because someone's invited me. I've done nothing. I've lived in the gutter, right? I've done probably horrible things. I've been invited. I'm going. The other people who have thought that they could gain the righteousness by works, the Pharisees, the Jews, if you think about it at the time, they thought that they could do it. And then all of a sudden the Gentiles are invited in, you know? So it really symbolizes, there's a lot, if you look at a lot of them are symbolic of the Jews. Remember what it says in the beginning of John, he came to which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to those who did receive him, he gave them the right to become children of God, not born of flesh, but born from above.
Yeah.
And then it says, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? So that's in the very first verses of John, basically saying he came to his own, but his own did not even receive him. His own did not even know him. His own meaning the Jewish people. So not all of them, but in a sense, overarching, they did. And so when Jesus went to the lost sheep of Israel and he told his disciples to go there first, and then finally, when they finally ended up rejecting him, the light to the Gentiles had come into the world, which was prophesied in the first couple chapters of Luke when Simeon lifted him up in the temple and said, "You will be a light. He will be a light to the Gentiles." That is a weird, like you think about that in a Jewish culture, that's a weird verse. And Simeon was a Jew, and the prophetess there was a Jew too. You know what I mean? And he said he will be a light to the Gentiles. Wow. Like, so you see all these symbolic things where the Jews rejected him, and yet he went to other people out there in the streets who, in effect, were the outcasts. They could have been Jews too, but a lot of the outcasts were symbolized as the Gentiles, where the Jews overwhelmingly rejected him, right? Mm-hmm. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's a
well, yeah, it's
you know, but the gathering of them at the end of the days, the wedding banquet, the actual physical wedding banquet that happened in John chapter 2. The parable, the banquet parable that actually happened, the gathering that it tells us to do in Hebrews and not neglect the gathering of the saints, you know what I mean? And then the things that we had talked about before, where certain things that we're instructed to do as a group of saints, you can't do you can't do any other way, unless you are gathered. Right? You can't anoint someone with oil unless you're together with them. You cannot lay hands on them unless you're together with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So it just says that, you know, if you're talking about holiday gatherings, for example, like, and you can kind of extrapolate. I think you could. I mean, I'm not trying to but you can extrapolate that out to holiday gatherings that we do. We do Christmas, we do Easter, we do Thanksgiving, we might even do 4th of July. You can add all those things in. But what did the Jews do? I mean, there's all sorts of ones that they did, and I'm not an Old Testament. You probably know better than I do about the Old Testament, but what were the primary ones that they did? I would say the primary one was the Passover, right?
Yeah.
And yet when they went to celebrate the Passover, the ultimate Passover where Jesus was crucified, they couldn't celebrate the Passover. They said, we need him down from the cross so we can celebrate the Passover. But the lamb was up there, and they were going back to the old way of slaughtering the lamb, mm-hmm. rather than understanding, well, he was the ultimate sacrifice for everyone. I mean, they totally missed the point. I mean, it's the ultimate rejection of who Christ was, when in fact they had to get him taken down in order to celebrate what they thought was the way to celebrate the Passover, and not understanding the meaning behind it.
I don't know why, but for some reason, you know, we've talked many times about how Jonah is he's kind of a shadow of Christ, right? Mm-hmm. Except for, just like in the parable, you know, he's upset and he's upset that the city turned from their ways and were accepted back into the kingdom of God, technically speaking, right?
Yeah.
Or they were saved by God, right? And so instead of destroyed by God. So it's really interesting. It's kind of funny to just, I don't know. We've talked about it before. I love the story.
It's a great story, and it's hard to go past it. Yep.
Yeah, you wonder if like how much did the city celebrate or something when they realized they're not going to be destroyed or something, or do you think there was some sort of celebration or something like that. And then the other fact is Jonah did not celebrate. You know what I mean? The fact that they had been.
Did the silly so there was a decree, so to speak. Remind me of this. I think there was a decree by the head of Nineveh, to wear sackcloth and ashes. Was that a celebration? Did they do any more than that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, well, I mean that was them repenting.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So they did the repenting, and I wonder if after the repenting and the repenting works, I wonder if I wonder, I mean, this is all just speculation, of course, but I wonder if they did. Yeah, do some sort of celebration afterwards. They're like, "Hey, we did it, guys. We survived."
I have a feeling there were probably more celebrations. I mean, it's I'm not. I think something's wrong with me because I'm not really big into celebrations. I'm not big into tradition, right? And if you think about the
tradition, yeah, see, that's kind of weird because I always kind of pictured and thought of you of kind of the opposite way. I kind of always felt you were more traditional.
I think Mom pushes me that way, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like if I mean, putting up a Christmas tree, meh. I think it's cool. I like looking at lights and stuff like that. I'm enamored by lights, as a matter of fact. But just the act of doing it, meh. Making dinner. I mean, I follow. So I hate to say it, I follow what she has to do. But if you think about tradition, there is. Jesus rebuked them, the Pharisees, following the tradition of the elders. So there is tradition that really is good and makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And tradition could be, I'm celebrating a meal, I'm celebrating a wedding, I'm celebrating whatever, because I understand the meaning behind it, right?
Yeah.
So tradition isn't a bad or good thing. It just is a thing. The way I would think about it, I guess biblically, is that it's not a bad. Actually, no, I would say that tradition can be a very good thing. I should say. I'm not saying this. I think it can be. It's meant to be a good thing, I should say, right? But if you're following the tradition of the elders and the way Jesus ascribed it to the Pharisees, is you're doing that. And the way that you're following the tradition of elders, you're following their interpretation of what scriptures say.
Yeah.
And they absolutely, don't know what they're talking about when it comes to explanation. In other words, when Jesus has, said a few times in the New Testament, "Have you not read?" That was like a rebuke. Yeah. Have you not read? Like you've got this. In fact, if you're going to be a Pharisee, you have to have a certain competency of memorization of the Pentateuch, of the first 5 books of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
You have to. I think they had to actually have it all memorized or something like that to even qualify. I could be wrong, but
yeah, especially
there's it's a much higher level than we have of pastors this day and age, right?
Yeah,
where they don't even have to know their original language and they could horribly interpret the Word of God, right? But it's. So it's one thing to know it. It's another thing to understand behind the Sabbath day rest, which is, okay, I'll give it away. It's Jesus. It says so in Hebrews, right? Or behind the Passover lamb, who we understand, the Passover that happened every annually, and Jesus being crucified on the Passover, symbolizing who he really was, right? And the final once for all sacrifice for everyone for the remission of sins. It's interesting that, I guess for me, all of this symbolism and all of this tradition, it can be a good thing if we understand the meaning behind it, and if we go in there with for whatever reason, a wedding. We go to a wedding and we understand that it's 2 people joined together, but it also has to do with the marriage supper of the Lamb at the, after everything is consummated, so to speak, right? Well,
yeah. A lot of that.
I think I'm rambling on, but
a lot of that's really, really good stuff. Some of it is a little baseline understanding of Christianity, like Okay, so
Maybe for you and me, but I think honestly,
yeah,
I've
I mean
seen,
that is true.
I've seen a
True.
lot of goofy things. They don't even understand Jesus was like the Gentiles. They don't understand the symbolism in the
Yeah.
second chapter of
Well, the
John.
whole thing
That
with
is key. Like that is key to understanding right
the whole
away
thing
who
with the
Jesus is.
Passover is, when they're in Egypt, right, and the
Hmm.
angel of death comes
Hmm.
to kill all the firstborn,
Yep.
and they put lamb's blood
Yep.
on the doors, right? Lamb's blood, and then
Yep.
Jesus is the Lamb of God. You know what I mean? And so he's the sacrifice. So they obviously they sacrificed a lamb in
Hmm.
order to put the blood on their doorways.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean it's all connected and it's all important. I guess maybe my you were talking about gosh, understanding that tradition or understanding the meaning behind it and the gathering behind it and everything like that. And it's like, so I mean, so when we have Thanksgiving, when we
Hmm.
have Christmas and the family gets together and everything, like, what is it specifically that does for us? You know what I mean? What is it that um what is that I guess that connection that the reminder of who we are, a reminder of where we came from, or where are, like, when we sit down at for Thanksgiving, and I'm sitting next to mom and you, and we're talking or whatever, or somebody's talking to you guys. I remember, you guys raised me, and these thoughts and these ideas and these things that you speak about are, what taught me and what made me be the person that I am today. And so, like, part of that is a reconnecting to that or something. mm. You get what I'm saying?
I do. I mean, I
Like,
don't. Go ahead.
your family, uh obviously, you have a ton of sisters and they have a ton of kids. And back when we used to do Christmas with them, because we used to live on the other side of the country, which is where they all live, but when we'd have these big Christmas gatherings and everything, like, those things were insane because there were so many people crammed into the house, right?
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, like, when that happened, was that, like, this reconnecting time, or this time to reconnect, with your siblings, with, your nieces and nephews and your parents and everything like that. You get what I'm saying?
Oh boy. I mean, man, it's. Let me confess here, because it's not always a reminder for me, and it should be, right. It should be, um because let's not lie here. Holidays can be a more stressful time for a lot of people than it is a celebration,
Oh,
right.
yes. Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
don't want to dismiss that, you know what I mean,
That's a
what it,
great point. Yeah.
I don't want to just say, oh, it's a hunky-dory time. It isn't. It is. There are mixed emotions when it comes to holiday gathering, relatives. Relatives, some I get along with really good. Sometimes, I don't get along with so and so, or for whatever reason. Oh, is so and so going to be there? I don't want to be there if they're there. All of that stuff, you know, I mean,
Yeah, you're
no,
like
I mean,
preaching to the choir right now.
well, or I
Jeez.
mean, or it could be, but is that a reason to neglect it? But the other thing too is that, I mean, it could be Christmas presents. It's the expectation of what to give people for gifts, as gifts, to certain people, and that expectation, because I might not give that person the right gift, and they may be disappointed, rather than gracious for what they received. I mean, all of these things come to play,
Yeah.
right now. So maybe the best thing to do is say, well, how should we look at it, rather than how do we look at it, right?
Yeah. Oh, see, there we go. Now we're getting into the deep stuff. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Yeah. Yes. Yes. That I think that's where. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to talk about right there. What you're just talking about right now, because it's like we do the gift giving and everything like that,
Mhm.
and it's part of the tradition of it and everything. But, like, how important is that specific part of the tradition. It's probably not that important. In fact, the gift giving thing can probably be like whatever. That should be your attitude towards it. Your attitude towards the giving should be, hey, if I get something, awesome. If I don't, no big deal. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good attitude to go in it.
Yeah.
I think that may be the start of it. Start there, maybe.
Yeah. The more important thing is the getting together and spending time with each other, right? Because, you have strained relationships sometimes with, members of your family, and this is your opportunity to, to either mend or to enjoy some time together, you know what I mean? Or to, just reconnect or something like that. Yeah. So if you're struggling with a family member that you're not getting along with or something like that, and there's a problem, you know what I mean? Here it is. You guys can throw everything aside because you guys know that it's important to go and spend time together at Christmas time or spend together time at Thanksgiving or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You know that that's an important time. And so you take the time to throw away the trash, so to speak, you know what I mean? And gosh, it's almost like you should start clean every time, you know what I mean? But it's hard like not to. I'm not saying as humans in our imperfect nature that we do that, but that's what you should be doing, I guess. That's what the holiday, that's what the Christmas, that's what the Thanksgiving should be for you as an individual.
I like that attitude. And again, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm good at this, but I like that. I like exactly what you said, that, sometimes we purpose in our heart and our mind to go about something a certain way, right? Not exactly how we're going to be doing a certain thing, or we actually have an anxious moment and we got to face, let's just say we got to face someone, and then we go up to it and we know what we're going to say or not say. It's not so much that, it's we have the right heart and mind as we're going into it, and we know that no matter what happens, that it's not about me, right? So if you think about what is Thanksgiving there for? I mean, some people can argue it was about the Pilgrims and the Indians or whatever. I mean, I can't even tell you that I understand the story, because I've heard probably 5 different versions of it. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And I honestly don't know which is true. But I think the most important thing is, if you're at Thanksgiving and you're having a meal, and so to speak, you're breaking bread in the meal, right? Think of meal maybe as breaking the bread. What does that mean, right?
Yeah.
You're coming together as one, and you're hopefully going to just enjoy a meal together as one. You know what I mean? And maybe Christmas is, and I think most importantly is this is every day in life, but maybe these are reminders of, especially Christmas, right? Christmas is a reminder of Christ coming into the world, and the gift giving is a selfless act, right? So if you have a selfless act and you're going to give gifts to certain individuals, right? I mean, and we purposed, we've actually said grandma and grandpa, we're only going to give Christmas gifts to the grandkids, right?
Yeah.
That's just the way we moved, and we said that, and I think that's fair, but it's us giving to them, and it's not expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
And so it's not about me. It's not about my feelings. It's about how am I going to be a giving person during that time, because someone actually gave something of significance to me 2,000 years ago. And so maybe that's the way to go about looking at it,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. So you did have a little bit of a thing there where it was a little, you said for Thanksgiving, you don't really know about the Pilgrim thing, but then you said for Christmas, we remember Christ, right? So you have the story of what it is. Now, once again,
are you going to talk about the real story? I don't know.
Well, well,
or I don't know.
But yeah, well, that's the same. The thing is, you don't know the real story of Thanksgiving, but you know the real story of Christ, which is interesting, right? Because we've talked about, I know people know this. People know that like Christmas is not the actual time when he was born, right? He was born at probably a different time of the year, right? And then yeah, I mean, we've added a lot of stuff to the celebration that actually came from other religions, so to speak, like the Christmas tree itself. You know, obviously that's not stemming from the Jewish, you know, religion or tradition. They didn't do anything like that. That comes from a European tradition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That comes from elsewhere. The gift giving too. I mean, you know, and we do it nowadays. You know what I mean? And the way you described it is perfect. But you know, like, where did that stem from? Does it really matter? I guess it really doesn't matter, right? Like I said, this is the whole point. That's the whole point. Is of exactly what we were just talking about. It doesn't really matter. That stuff really doesn't matter. The gift giving really doesn't matter. The Christmas tree itself doesn't matter, right? Even though it's part of the tradition, you know, that we put together forth. The point of it all is to get together, I guess. And then, you know, you did bring up the good point of the remembrance of Christ, you know what I mean, his birth and everything like that. You know what I mean? Actually, you know, that's interesting. I guess we can take a quick little side tangent here. We often talk about, so the key to the Bible is almost nothing else in the Bible really necessarily matters as much as the resurrection, right? If Jesus Christ wasn't resurrected, the rest of the Bible is trash, right? So Jesus' resurrection is the most important. But there is another thing that's almost equally as important, which is the fact that he was born of a virgin, right? So I don't know, to go off on a little Christmas tangent here. The reason why it is important to remember his birth is because the fact that we remember that he was born from a virgin, right? Because if you don't have that, the rest of the story has kind of a problem, right? He needs to be born, you know, without sin. Right?
Yeah. No seed of Adam. That's one thing. And then all of the prophecies. I mean, it's a strange story. You know what I mean? You think about the kings, whether there's 3 or 20 kings. It doesn't say. It just says there were 3 gifts given by the kings, right?
Oh yeah.
But the kings came from the east, and they traveled, followed a star, and then they come to Jerusalem, right? Anyway, should I even go? Anyway, but they come to Jerusalem, and then they meet Herod, and Herod says, "Oh, why don't you, you know, like tell me what's going on here, and tell me, you know, once you find the guy, come back and report to me, because I want to worship him too." He wanted to kill him, is what he wanted to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
crazy.
And so Herod summons some seers or biblical scholars, and they say, "Yeah, he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem." Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sounds good. You know what I mean? So they knew where he was supposed to be born. They had the kings traveling to the place, right? Now, the kings weren't there the same day as the shepherds, by the way. That's a whole different, thing about timeline, where the shepherds were told, this day in the city of David, to you, the Christ child has been born, right? And so they go in there and they see him at that time, and they marveled because of that, right? So now the city of David it's not Jerusalem, it's not Nazareth, it's Bethlehem, right? Now, why did they go to the city of Bethlehem? It's because there was a census that was decreed. And so the census being decreed, when a census is given today, you have census people that go out, and then they actually take the census and find out how many people are in households and different things like that, right? Yeah. Back then, you had to actually travel to the city the city of your relatives, right?
Yeah.
So they traveled. They, meaning both Mary and David, right?
Joseph.
What did I say? Oh, yeah. Mary and Joseph traveled to the city of David, just because there was a census, and Mary happened to be pregnant at the time. So it was to fulfill the prophecy that he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is close to Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
But it's really just it's like the city of Live Oak. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like people, you know, 300 miles away in our day and age, you know, where we know everything, people would go, "Where's that?" You know what I mean? It's not like a well-known city. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not like it's probably known back then. I shouldn't say that, but it wasn't like this excellent city, so to speak, right? But anyway, where was I going with this? Anyway, point being is that is that whole thing about Jesus's birth is it's a great story, and like you said, if he hadn't risen, basically his birth would be null and void. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is the resurrection, but the two are interlinked. Sometimes this is hard to peel one apart from the other.
Yeah.
But Paul does say if Christ isn't resurrected, then basically our faith is worthless. We're still in our sins. That's what he says, right? And so he actually says that basically the resurrection, and what he preached, Paul says, of all the things I preach Christ and him crucified. In other words, that's my sole focus. If I preach all these other things and talk about these other doctrines and get into these man-made doctrines and get intertwined with that type of philosophy, so to speak, or that type of discussion when it comes to someone that's maybe unbelieving that I need to really talk to him about important things, that's a side note. I need to talk about Christ and him crucified and the importance of that, right? So that's what Paul said, and then he says, like I said, if he hasn't raised from the dead, then our faith is worthless. We're still in our sins. All that to say is that they're intertwined quite a bit, but the birth it's a great remembrance of the gift that God gave and how he saved Jesus through the time where Herod was sending people in to kill any baby that was 2 years old or less. If you think about that, it's like, why 2 years old or less? It's because the wise men didn't come the same time the shepherds did.
Yeah.
You know, so the timing they didn't quite know, I think, is probably what happened, I think. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, how old is this babe that you're going to go see?
It also might have been he was just being safe. He's like, well, just in case they're off by a year or something like that, I'll go 1 year in both directions or something. I don't know, maybe. And
then they give him gifts. They give him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? And remember, the gift that was given in the temple when Jesus was 8 was a dove. It was a poor man's gift of a sacrifice, right? Now, you think maybe they gave him gold, and then that gold helped them get where they needed to go to, in other words, to Egypt.
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of weird. I don't want to go off on any weird
no, but it's good timing.
things.
It's like okay, now I can actually go escape to Egypt, because in a dream I'm told you got to get out of here because Herod's going to he's killing babes is what he's doing, right? And he's out to slaughter them. So they escaped there, and then they were told in a dream to come back, but then they settled in Nazareth because they said, they wanted to make sure, I guess, So, but anyway, I'm getting way off on tangents, but it's a great remembrance because his birth. My point is that yes, birth and resurrection are very intertwined. The resurrection, if you were to say which one's most important, is the resurrection, but you wouldn't have one without the other.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah, I totally get that. Now it's interesting. You were talking there. I was kind of thinking back as we were talking about celebration. So we go back to the very beginning of this discussion. And so this Christmas thing, one of the ways when we do the celebration though is we have this version of prayer and remembrance, and there's often this like think of Charlie Brown Christmas Story, right? At the end, where it's not they do the dancing and stuff at the beginning, but at the end, it's this this one where Linus is standing on the stage and the light shines on him, and he says the story very seriously and very solemnly, almost. You know what I mean? It's like this is what happened. This is why it is. And then at the end, when they're standing in front of the Christmas tree that they finally fixed up and everything like that, and they start singing. They start singing, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." So when we were talking before sometimes about sacrifice and about sacrificing in remembrance in this or not in this remembrance, in a grateful way, right? You're sacrificing in a worshipful way. Worship. That's what it is. Yeah. So that's what I was trying to get to. Okay, so sometimes celebration and worship are entwined. Sometimes there's a version of celebrating that is we are worshiping in our celebration, so to speak.
Yeah.
You can mix the two together, and they could be one and the same, and that's probably a really great way to go about celebrating something is by making sure that you're. I went to a wedding recently.
Mm-hmm.
One of my best friends, his daughter got married, and went to her wedding, and there was a lot of talk of God. You know what I mean? There was, like, as they're doing the thing, her grandpa ended up marrying her, and you know, his prayer and his talk of God was very much intertwined into the thing. You know, it's not like this is a separate thing. It's like God has brought these people in. So you're worshiping, and you're celebrating the fact that they're getting married, but you're also worshiping God in this at the same time, right? And so maybe that's something to do with, you know, with the way that we go, or we should go about with Christmas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. I mean, or I couldn't have said it better than you did. You're right. It's again, I mean, I'm trying as we do with these podcasts, is you pick a subject and then we just talk and we try to work through this. I do think that it probably is a good exercise for us to just go in there, you know, going to the celebrate Christmas, for example, going to the Christmas Day meal that whoever's family is gonna be out there, going to it with the mindset that I'm going to be thankful for, you know, I'm gonna go in there with a thankful heart, right?
Yeah.
And go in there with the mindset that if there's friction with families, with relatives, with in-laws, whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter, that you go in there with a mindset of, I don't know, I mean, I'm not going to start anything. No, I'm just kidding. No, no, that you are going to not be selfish. Because if you think about, you know, you think about quarrels among you and different things like that. James even talks about quarrels, you know, and how wars start. It's because that we're doing things for ourselves, and we're selfish beings, and we're not putting everything out, casting everything else aside, and we're, you know, given thought or given worship or given any thanks to the person that has given all for us, right? And we're just thinking of, you know, my feelings and me. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of words. I think the best thing to do is, I don't know, more I think about it, is just going, if there's angst about it, go in there with a mindset of you're going to be thankful. You're going to go in there with a thankful heart. Doesn't matter what you give, doesn't matter what you receive. Even if you don't receive anything, you're going to enjoy the people that you've gathered together with, right?
Yeah.
And that's maybe the best mindset to go into any holiday or any celebration with. We're talking about Thanksgiving, right? Because it just passed. We're talking about Christmas because it's coming up.
Yeah.
But it could be a barbecue on a front porch.
Well, like
you know
said,
what I mean, or a front yard.
July.
Yeah, I mean, it could be anything where you have neighbors that have something and they're inviting you over or whatever. You know, it could be anything.
Well, see, this goes back into that. Now I've expanded out, and now you've gotten me really thinking good here. I'm thinking about, we talked about that freedom in Christ, right? It's like, all right, so what happens when you do give a gift to your kid, right? Or you give a gift to your grandkid, right? You want them to now play with it. You now want them to enjoy it. You now want them. So God has given us this gift. We're thankful to Him, and we are, we're thankful, and we want to let Him know that we are glad of it. And then now, one of the ways that we can show that we are glad of what we have is by going out and using it. You know what I mean? So go out and. I mean, now we're getting to this. It might be a little too overarching, but you know, God has given you this life. You know what I mean, and forgiven you of your sins. Now go out and enjoy your life. Go out and have fun, and go out and you know, I don't know, back to spending time with your family and everything like that. Spend time with your family, enjoy the time that you have with your family, enjoy, you know what I mean, the life that God has given to you, I guess, in that gift.
Yeah,
You know?
I wonder if a lot of times we give. So you think about giving, right? Giving should be selfless, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the way giving should be, right?
Yeah.
But it isn't always. Sometimes it comes with an attached expectation. It never should, but it does at times.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes the attached expectation is, I'm going to give that person a gift and I'm going to be upset if they don't use it. You know what I mean? So there's one side where basically I think I'm given a really good gift and then they end up not using it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be bent out of shape if they don't, I guess. I'm working through this, but I shouldn't be thinking to myself and be mad if they don't use it. But then again, if I'm on the receiving end, what is the expectation for me to use something that I may not find a use for? I don't know. I mean, you know what I mean? But on whether I'm on the receiving end or the giving end, I guess there shouldn't be an expectation, especially on the giving end. It shouldn't be an expectation that person is going to get benefit out of it or receive it. Maybe
Yeah,
you know,
well,
I mean,
how
do I go about that with the right heart? I guess.
I guess I wanted to avoid talking about you know, how what God would think of it. But I don't know, like, how much expectation does God have of us to use our gifts that He's given us? You know what I mean? Like, because on one hand, you're saying, you know, that the gift giver shouldn't have expectations, but then God does have expectations of us, obviously. I'm not for sure. or do we have that wrong? Does God not have expectations of us? In fact, he gives us our lives and to do what we want with them. You know what I mean? And in that, and is He just happy having, you know, just given a, but see, then we're back to this thing where I would say that then everybody gets to heaven. You know what I mean? And obviously that's one of our topics where we kind of go back and forth on right there. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. I don't know. I think we've kind of hit the top of our we've taken the conversation to the max right there. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think just it's a reminder for me to be you know, less selfish and more, you know, more giving without expectation. I do think as from a human perspective, I do think that there ought not be expectation when we give something. You know what I mean, so to speak. I mean there's things where if I'm paying for my kid to do something, they say they want to. You know, they want to do something. You know,
yeah. If you were to give a car to your grandson, right?
Mm-hmm.
KT's almost well, he's starting to learn how to drive, but say you did have enough money, or the rest of the family was able to pull together to buy him a new car or something like that. You would expect him to use it. Yeah, you know what I mean. If he wasn't using it, would you be a little upset? Probably. I would.
I mean, I think there are probably expectations when it comes to that. So I think when it's man, how do I actually separate the two? Because you actually bring up a good point. If I'm going to give a gift to, you know, someone during Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. It's a gift. That's all it is.
Yeah,
I would say that's all it is. If I'm going to give something like I have a kid and they say they want piano lessons, and then I give them piano lessons and they're not practicing, you know, in between the time, you know, I might be a little bit upset because I'm spending money on something that they said they wanted and they're not putting forth an effort.
Yeah.
So there might be that, but I think as holidays go, sometimes we're just there. And we're a blessing to the people that are there. Yeah. And the only way that we can be a blessing is to be as selfless as possible and less selfish as possible, right? So, but the car thing, yeah, you bring up a good point. You know, they say they want a car, they want to get the license, and we say okay, you know, How you gonna? What do you need the license for? I want to drive. Well, you don't have a car, so we're gonna help you get a car, and then they don't use it. Yeah, yeah, it might be. That might be an example, but
Yeah.
So how do we go about that? But celebrations and gatherings. I think to that respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's try to be a blessing to the people we're around, no matter if it's a holiday or whatever.
Yeah, and just be thankful. And like I said, like I said, I think we're at the end of this conversation. we did pretty good. I don't know. I think
one other thing I do want to mention that I was thinking at the beginning though, and it does have and I think it does kind of intersect a little bit, right? You think about think about Thanksgiving. You're doing all of these things. Not everyone, but basically the host is probably the doing, right? They're doing the most of the meal planning, the prep, all of that stuff. They may ask other people to bring some stuff so they don't have to do everything, and they only got one oven, and they're trying to cook 10 different things, right? Whatever the case may be. So they're doing all the planning, right? But we got the Martha and Mary scenario where these are sisters of Lazarus, and they're there, and one of them, Mary, actually comes to worship at Jesus' feet, and Martha's in the kitchen, like struggling to make the meal, and then she's telling Jesus, "Why don't you tell my sister to come help me?" You know what I mean? And Jesus says, "Well, like you're all you're stressed out about nothing really, and this person's coming to worship me, and you're in there trying to do all these things." Just probably not a good paraphrase, but it's just saying that sometimes in the doing of the thing we get stressed out too. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So how do we go about enjoying the doing or enjoying the sitting? You know what I mean? If we're on either side of the spectrum, because there's people that do have to do the doing, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that we haven't brought up yet. Yeah, is yes, there is. Yeah, there's the responsibility of the host and everything. Like, I have friends over at my house, and I go over to my friend's house, and when we do this, I mean, it's basically a small party. I mean, it's like we're gathering around, we're eating, mm-hmm. Someone's cooking the food, someone's bringing the soda, you know what I mean? Someone's bringing the board game that we're going to play, or the card game that we're going to play, or whatever, and there's an expectation. There's a time, like a time thing. How late are these people going to stay? Mm-hmm. That's one
thing. There's people that we outsay they're welcome. No, I don't know.
Well, that's the funny thing. Yeah, is there was an incident about 3 weeks ago where we told the one person wanted to host, and we told them, look, this is the night where we want to stay out till midnight, stay out till 2 a.m., right? And about 11 a.m. he was done. He was like, all right, guys, I got to go to bed. And we were like, oh, come on. We told you before we were coming over. We said we're staying till 2 a.m.
Well, invite him, but make sure he doesn't host again.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's what we determined. We said, next time we're going to your house, Zach. That's what we all said. We said, okay.
That is pretty funny.
No,
it's a good one.
I think we got somewhere with this conversation. Yeah. I hope this, if you're still watching, I hope you guys kind of saw how we kind of worked through the conversation. I think, like I was saying at the very, very beginning, I think that showing that working through that process of moving from one thing to another, because at first, you were spitting out a couple of different things, and I was kind of like, okay, which one do I really want to concentrate on? Where do I think I'm going to get the most value out of, and everything mm-hmm. like that? And eventually we worked through it until we started finding valuable stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Valuable information, you know what I mean? To use my own parable or something like that, it's almost like digging for treasure, right? You mm-hmm. have this, you have an area, you know what I mean, that you're going to start digging through, and as you dig deeper, you'll find little chunks of gold or valuable information, right? Is what you're finding. You're finding these little chunks of information that are good for you to know and good for you to keep in your heart. Like mm-hmm. I said, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking these are what the treasures in heaven are, right? It's these good ideas these good things that you keep, with inside your soul, you know what I mean, that remind you of how to act, how to behave, how to treat other people, you know what I mean, how when you're in a difficult situation where you're not getting along with a relative, how to what is the appropriate way to approach that. And I'm not good at it, and I know I have a lot of improving to do, but us talking about it here, you know what I mean, helps put that into my soul that, okay, what I need to do is I need to be, I need to put stuff aside. When it's Christmas time, when it's Thanksgiving time, when we're celebrating, when it's holiday time, it's time to put away all that other stuff, and it's time for us to be a family.
Yeah, and yeah, I would agree. I would agree. It's easy to remember. It's hard to do. You know what I mean? And again, like I said before, I think Christmas and I think gatherings, especially Christmas and Thanksgiving, is probably more stressful for a lot more people than we realize. You know what I mean? And so hopefully we can go about it the right way. It's not easy, so I'm not saying it is. I don't think you're not saying it is.
No.
But hopefully, as we're working through things, you guys can work through things as well.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, guys. If you're still here, man, like, subscribe, give us a comment. We love comments. We love to respond to comments. We would love some comments. So, other than that, thanks very much, guys. See you around.